Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. I accidentally hit the start button of the live stream about a couple of minutes ago, so I had to reset a couple of things. So, welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee weather show on the 23rd of July, 2019. Everybody is still talking about that severe weather from yesterday. I really have racked my brains out. I think that was probably one of the, at least for my area, one of the largest severe weather outbreaks that I've seen in my career here in the New York area in the last 30 some odd years. Virtually every county in New Jersey last night at the same time was under a gigantic severe thunderstorm warning, and the few counties in North Jersey that weren't in it were all in flash flood warnings, and some had both going on at the same time. It was just an absolutely crazy night. We saw similar conditions, of course, in the Hudson Valley. We saw similar conditions across New York City and Long Island. Then we had heavy rain last night in some places, flash flooding across Long Island this morning, on the order of 2 to 4 inches worth of rain in many locations, a little bit uneven, but I certainly got into it. I heard the buckets of rain coming down off the roof last night. At least that's what it sounded like. And now we are in the process of getting to some better weather and better air and lower humidity, but it's been some work because this frontal boundary is still nearby, and we have to wait for the upper trough that is swinging through here to just kind of push everything out far enough offshore so that we can see some genuine improvement. And that will come. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And we've got one more wave of low pressure to work through before that happens. So we'll take a look. I'm going to start off tonight with the surface map here. And you can pretty well see what's happening. First off, look at the two buoys that are out in the Atlantic, where we are seeing northwest and north winds being indicated by those two buoys. The frontal boundary lies just south and east of there. And we are waiting, of course, it's a northwest wind in that buoy that's well southeast of Nantucket. Three waves of low pressure developed on this front. The first one that moved through yesterday evening helped to create that warm sector that produced the severe weather. The second wave came through overnight and this morning, and that brought through some heavy rains for coastal areas. Now we have wave number 3 that is going to be bringing a glancing area of rain to some of the area, seeing some light shower activity going on before we get into the drier air. Now, out to the west in Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania, we have some showers and even a couple of thunderstorms in the mix, and that's where the upper trough is. So we're just kind of waiting for it to swing on through, because behind it, take a look at the temperature dew point in Franklin, Pennsylvania, 70 with a dew point of 48. Pittsburgh is 73.55. Akron, Ohio, 75 with a dew point of 46 and a northerly wind at 12. Looking at Youngstown, 73 with a dew point of 46. So that's where the cool, dry air is. It is on the way. In the meantime, that boundary is offshore, but it pulls back closer to the coast. So we've got rain down in Delaware and into Virginia, in southeastern Virginia, where temperatures right now are in the 60s with a northerly wind. And further south, as the radar will plot, there is a snaking line of heavy thunderstorms moving through eastern North Carolina. Temperatures along the Carolina coast are in the 80s and dew points in the 70s. And right behind it, you go from those southwest winds to those northerly winds. And that snaking line runs all the way down into just about to the state of Georgia, where we've got some rain showers and thunderstorms scattered around the southern part of the state, and those extend down into the Florida Panhandle. So this is where the action is really, as we wait for this frontal boundary to just continue to push on offshore. And also the southern end of that frontal boundary is going to be dropping into the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to talk about that a bit more a little later on. Further north, we'll take you up into Tennessee, and northern Alabama, Mississippi, where we've got dew points down in the upper 50s and lower 60s. So some drier air making it pretty far south into the Gulf states, and you can see some really pleasant conditions here across Kentucky. Temperatures around 80, dew points in the 50s. Same goes for up and through Indiana and Illinois. So this is some nice dry air that is waiting for us. It just needs to get in here. The extent of severe weather tonight, we're going to come back to this map in a moment, but let's bring the severe weather risk area into play. And there we have a working severe thunderstorm watch still right along the immediate North Carolina coast in that blue area. That's the marginal risk of severe weather that's being indicated. Also, by the way, down in the southwest, we're seeing a small area of marginal risk in parts of Arizona, Nevada, and southwestern Utah, and also on up further north in northern Idaho, eastern Washington into Montana, and northeastern Oregon, and a small part of northwestern Wyoming at a marginal risk for severe weather. So at least we're not seeing what we saw yesterday, which was a slight risk, and when you think about what the outcome was, could have very easily have been an enhanced risk of severe weather that could have been indicated. Now, the rainfall from WPC over the next 7 days is going to be focused down in the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see there's quite a bit of rain being indicated here, so that's telling you that there's going to be some disturbed weather there. That extends across Florida, much of Florida in a pretty wet pattern here. This boundary is pretty far to the south, and then on up off the Atlantic coast, you've got all that rain. So there's the alleyway is offshore. Meanwhile, not much being indicated rain-wise in the northeast and down into the mid-Atlantic states and into the southeast, away from the immediate coast at least, over the next 7 days. And by the way, much of that is going to come later in the weekend and particularly next week. At least for my neck of the woods, there probably won't be much of anything going on between Wednesday and Sunday. Some action down in the southwest with some rains, also around the Great Lakes. The immediate west coast is dry, but east of the mountains, you are seeing some very light precip. We're talking about generally a quarter of an inch or less, but that's probably coming from whatever scattered shower and thunderstorm activity there is. So let's look at the satellite loop tonight. And a few things happening. Of course, that long boundary running from New England down through the southeast and into the Gulf of Mexico. The clouds that you see off the southeast coast and off the Florida east coast, the remnants of Tropical Depression 3, which pretty much fell apart. No evidence of a low-level circulation right now, and a lot of that moisture is basically going to get wrapped up inside that frontal zone, and it'll all become one, and it'll just stay out there over the open waters. But that tropical moisture is going to be there. In the meantime, you also could see the cutout of drier air back through the Great Lakes and down into the southern plains and back over into the Rockies, nice and dry. You also see the clouds turning, running south to north, up through interior California and northward. So there's an upper high here that is back out in Wyoming and Colorado. So you're seeing the moisture kind of circulating around that. And then you have the trough in the east, which, as we mentioned, is we're waiting for the pivot to move it off the east coast, and that will come. Now, back to the maps. Here we go. And let's go to the GFS. I want to show you what's happening here with respect to the upper air pattern going forward. Maps, of course, courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. And we've been dealing with the jet stream being fairly close to or just south of the U.S.-Canadian border. Every so often it pushes further south, and then it backs up to the north again. And we're at one of those moments right now where we're seeing the jet stream pushing far to the south. Here's the upper air for this afternoon. Look how far south that trough gets. Northwest winds in the upper atmosphere all the way down into North Florida. So your frontal boundary is going to get pushed pretty far to the south with a trough like this. And again, waiting for it to move eastward, which it finally does do during the day on Wednesday. So we're finally going to get that push to see the improving weather conditions in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states during the day Wednesday, and then continuing for the rest of the week. Now you're going to be left with a weakness there down in the Gulf states. We'll come back to that in a bit. The main jet is running across Washington State into Montana, through the Dakotas, through the Great Lakes, and then on up through New England. It's still a northwest flow down to about southern New Jersey, but it is weaker there on the southern end. That jet's going to pull up to the north again, but this time around, unlike what we saw last weekend, the upper high off the East Coast is not going to bulge as far north. So there's going to be, I think, less in the way of a warm-up. And what I mean by that is not that it's not going to get hot. It's going to get very warm to borderline hot. But in terms of extreme heat, I don't think we're going to see it like what we saw last weekend. We'll probably see temperatures for much of the northern mid-Atlantic to southern to and the Northeast, get into a position where we'll be in the 80s to upper 80s and low 90s in the hot spots. But we're not going to be pushing upper 90s to near 100. That northern part of the jet stream for next Sunday, you see where that 588 line is showing up. That I think we could use as the southern extent of the jet. So it's pretty. The westerlies in the upper atmosphere are about. I would say it's probably about where you would normally see it this time of year. You have a flat east-west upper high in the southwest, extending into Texas, and then there's another upper high off the Florida coast, extending east-west, also on the flat side. And notice as we go through next week, that upper jet tries to drop down a bit, then pulls up a little bit. We've got an upper high in the middle of next week in the plains and in the middle Mississippi Valley, so it's likely to get hot and dry there. Interestingly, you've got easterly winds in the upper atmosphere, for the most part, across Florida and in through the Gulf of Mexico, because the upper high pulls up pretty far to the north. So this might lead to a condition over time where you could wind up with lower than average pressures there. And whether that means anything tropical comes out of it remains to be seen. But again, that northern jet flexing back and forth comes back down. We move into the first days of August. The GFS trying to show a fairly deep upper low and trough in eastern Canada. Would that this be real, because this could be a really decent shot of cool air coming in during the first week of August at some point, and that moves out to the east. We'll see if that winds up being reality, but I think the overall flavor of what's going on in the upper air pretty much is same old story, same old, with very little to worry about. Now, here's the surface map on the GFS. Low pressure, that third wave moving out tomorrow morning somewhere southeast of Cape Cod. I think it'll probably be better if I use the radar rather than the rainfall, so you can see where the precipit's actually being generated here. So there's a bit of a grazing of rain that goes on overnight in the coast from New Jersey to New England that's gone by daybreak, and then of course at this point, once that wave goes by, that front pushes just far enough out, but it's still there. Back off the East Coast, across Florida, and into the Gulf of Mexico. And we mentioned last week that you got to watch the southern end of that frontal boundary in the Gulf of Mexico, because this is where we saw that situation back a little over a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, when we had Barry forming in the northeastern Gulf. Now, I don't know if we're going to see something form there or not, but with that frontal boundary there and conditions in the upper atmosphere actually might be somewhat conducive for development, we have to keep our eyes on this. I personally like the fact that the GFS model is not showing what it sometimes shows when we get deeper into hurricane season, where it begins spinning up every low pressure it can find. And the Canadian, of course, is always guilty of this. But I'd rather just deal with what's going on, looking at it synoptically and looking at what's going on the satellite and radar, particularly when it comes to these homegrown systems in the tropics. But let's keep our eyes on the Northeast Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico, maybe more than just the Northeast Gulf. But let's keep our eyes on the Gulf of Mexico late this week and going into this weekend and next week with that frontal boundary stalling out. Meantime, here in the east, again, because of the nature of where the upper high is, that the surface high actually goes out off the Gulf of Maine. So we're not, if we go back to last weekend, we had west-northwest isobars here. And that's not going to be the case this time around. There's going to be a bit more of an onshore influence going into this weekend. So I think that tempers temperatures to some degree. That's why I don't think it's going to be getting up back to the upper 90s to near 100. And moving through the weekend, of course, humidity levels will be coming up. Not much in the way of thunderstorm activity expected through the weekend and into next week. And then we have the next front. You see it here on Monday running through the Great Lakes. There's another high coming down near Lake Winnipeg. And it looks like that front will probably arrive in the east sometime along about Wednesday, which, by the way, is the last day of the month of July. So another month is about to go into the history books, and then we head into August. And then beyond that, if this run of the model is correct, and we don't know that it is, it does suggest that you have another stronger front coming around August 4th. I'm sure this is going to change, but it would suggest that there will be another cool high coming down from the north into that first week of August. So, it pretty much to me just kind of says what we've been dealing with, we continue to deal with. No real major changes overall in the upper air pattern and in the scheme of things. Why don't we widen now, because I want to talk a little bit about the tropics tonight, and let's take a look. First off, we'll go to the North Atlantic and look at the upper air pattern going forward, because we're now going into the month of August. Well, in another 8 days, we'll be in the month of August, and of course, activity usually picks up by then. You do start to see the strengthening Bermuda Azores high that's out there. Various short waves in the northern jet will cut through it from time to some extent, but the penetration doesn't go too far to the south. But you have this sort of narrow east-west upper high that runs from the Canary Islands here. This is later next week, a week from now, and going back westward. It's not a particularly strong ridge, but it is there, and it continues to just kind of lay there across the Atlantic. The westerlies in the Atlantic, by the way, are pretty far to the south, down almost to Bermuda, and moving weather systems along in that northern part of the jet stream. There's how the model handles it, that deep upper low if it winds up happening, and you still have that semblance of a west-northwest flow coming out of Canada. But it's starting to look like what you would expect it to look like with regards to the upper air pattern. We'll see if there's a strengthening of those trade winds to bring in those systems that come off the African coast and begin moving across. We'll start off on the satellite views tonight. I want to start with the depression, the old depression, Tropical Depression 3. You're getting some blow up of thunderstorms here off the southeast coast. You see it there, but there's no real evidence of a low-level circulation. The clouds are just kind of being blown away southwest to northeast. And of course, you've got this frontal boundary. It's all sort of merging into one big mess. And here's our cloud cover. Notice not much eastward progress in the back edge of those clouds. Is starting to get a little eastward progress here during the late afternoon and evening. That back edge is pushing a bit further to the east into central Pennsylvania, but we have to get that wave. We've got to get that last wave to move on through in order to finally bring in some clearing. Now here's the western part of the frontal boundary, extending across southern Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, across Louisiana, and into the western Gulf. Now this whole thing is going to settle down into the Gulf over the next several days. Obviously, nothing's going to happen now, but maybe late. You get into the weekend and into early next week. This is worth, I think, keeping an eye on to see how it progresses over time. And with respect to the overall tropics, looking out across the tropical Atlantic, looks like we still have some Saharan dust issues going on out to the east. A wave is coming off the African coast, pretty highly disorganized. There was an upper low evident on the loop yesterday or the day before. It looks like it doesn't look quite as ominous there out in the subtropical Atlantic like it did. When I say ominous, I mean from the standpoint of the fact that for tropical systems, you get a big upper low in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It just basically shears weather systems apart. I really don't see much of anything going on here as these very weak tropical waves just continue to move westward. The Caribbean is, you just see some scattered clouds, but you can also see the blow-off clouds coming off South America and moving southwest to northeast. So that's the wind shear that is in play. So at least for now, the tropical Atlantic and pretty much the subtropical Atlantic east of from say the Dominican Republic to about Bermuda eastward looks fairly quiet and should stay fairly quiet at least for a while. So that pretty much, I think that kind of sums up. We're going into a bit of a quiet period here from the standpoint of day-to-day weather for the east, considering now that this front is offshore. So we'll be live streaming the next 3 days. I'm just mentioning the fact that there's not going to be a whole lot of weather going on, but you get into these quiet periods, and then lo and behold, all of a sudden you wind up with something to talk about, and maybe it'll be something in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe not. But I can say, at least from the standpoint of widespread severe weather, I'm not going to see much to worry about here after whatever's going on down in the Carolinas gets out of the way. So Lisa Nieves and Scott Briller, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Very much appreciated as always. And the chairman, with the stats. Scott, I know you sent me the fact that they changed the high temperature at Central Park last Friday from 89 to 91. And I just found that to be sort of odd because I don't know why they did that, who missed it. When they put out the summary that day, they did say 89 was the high. So I have no idea what happened. But I'm gonna pull it up off screen. And so if you use the 3-day heat wave definition, which I abhor, as everybody knows, I like 5 days. Oh, great. So I wanted to go look at the Climo page from the Weather Service, and it says, we are currently experiencing technical difficulties. Come back later. So it's conspiracy. They knew I was going to go there and check numbers. But I'm gonna ask my buddy there to find out what the story was with regards to last Friday. Johnny Quest at 65. You're going to see 40s tonight and tomorrow night, which you gotta love. Lisa Nieves is a fall and winter girl. I have to tell you, I'm kind of enjoying this summer, if only this month, from the standpoint that at least when it's gotten hot, these weather fronts have come through every 3 or 4 days and really has kept it from getting out of hand. Because if you think the weather hysterics were something this past weekend with the hot weather, and that was only that was really only 2 days of extreme heat. If you think the hysterics were big then, what are they going to do the next time the big cities get hit with a 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 day stretch of temperatures of 90 or better? What are they going to call that? It's very, at the very least, I find it just annoying. And one of the things that I take pride in is the fact that I really just make a valiant attempt not to get worked up in all the hysteria over weather. And of course, the severe weather outbreak last night was certainly a result of the heat and the humidity that we had this weekend and yesterday, and we had a development of a very, very prominent warm sector over New Jersey and over southeastern New York and southern New England. So no shocker that there were going to be some big storms. The dynamics were all there. It was well advertised. Then, of course, it gets whipped up into into a frenzy from the standpoint of trying to wrap this up inside a whole conversation involving climate change. And I really just don't want to get into all of that. There are other channels that I'm sure do that sort of thing, and that's their thing, and it's not mine. And we'll just leave it at that. Scott, wasn't it pleasant? We needed a cool. It was nice. Today with temperatures in the low to mid 70s with a little bit of light rain, it certainly felt very good. And by the way, Scott, say hi to your mom, and hope her recovery has gone really well, and that's very good to hear. Although she's no longer driving NASCAR, from what you said. Joseph Tufano, Poland, Maine, less than a quarter of an inch. No storms like everyone else. Yes, indeed. And this last wave is going to be moving out and moving away to the northeast, and you're going to get into that nice dry air as well. Pretty cool up there. I'm going to just take a look as far as temperatures going on in New England, because I really didn't give it a good look today. Well, not bad. New Hampshire right now in Laconia, it's 70 with a dew point of 59. At Stephen A. Bean Municipal Airport, which is up on the Maine New Hampshire border, but like all the way up, it is 66 with a dew point of 52. Rockland is 66 at 61 on the coast. Bar Harbor is 68, 57. Portland, Maine didn't report last hour. Auburn, Lewiston is 68 with a dew point of 51. And what about our buddies up in Caribou? They didn't report either. That's not nice. Oh, here we go. Caribou is 72 with a dew point of 54. I'm just looking at some of the numbers across New Brunswick and over Nova Scotia. Temperatures in the low 60s with dew points in the low 60s. So they got to be getting some rain up through Nova Scotia with the mostly east winds coming in off the water. So probably not the nicest of days that going on up in that part of Canada. Let's see. 2.43 inches of rain, Mark G. Well needed for the donut hole. I think I must have had about 3 inches of rain. I can tell when there's an area near my house that floods out every time we get at least 3 inches of rain. And when I left for work this afternoon around lunchtime, it was still pretty packed with water. So I think we got every bit of 3 inches. And I looked at some of the rain gauges in the areas around me, and a lot of places had 2, 3, 3.25. So that certainly made total sense. Car recalls. Dio likes the weather in New York City. Love it, love it, love it. You're going to like the next few days. I don't know what Judah is working on as far as the next winter is concerned, Scott. Let's wait till we get to October. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that when we get there. We still have a whole hurricane season to get to. Is that the Central Park is 101 when the guy recorded it is 99? That was back in May in the 1950s. Whatever when the all-time record high for May is 99. When as the story goes, it was really 101. When it broke 100 that day, the forecaster told the Observer to change it back to 99 because he had originally forecasted a high of 65 to 70. So he found himself having to change his forecast once an hour and kept raising the temperatures by 5 degrees and was behind the 8 ball from the get-go and was never able to catch up. So to save complete and total embarrassment, he twisted the arm of the Weather Observer, demanding that he put 99 instead of 101. I guess I guess it made him feel better. I don't know. Just running through the rest of the chat board today. Chris Alley, you're on board too, which is always good. And Shelly Man Studios, the Southwest is definitely getting rain with some showers. It's scattered stuff, but they are getting some rain there. And David Schwartz, I did see you point out the fact about the Saharan dust. It is back again today, but kind of ebbs and flows. It looked like it was going away. Then it shot back a bit in the last few days. It'll probably ebb back a bit in the next week or so. SG, hello from Hamilton, Missouri. Nice and sunny and cool. Nice to be here. Nice that you're here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you hit the subscribe button and hang around. We're here almost every night, and wait till the weather gets active. We get into it in a big way. James NASCAR fan. Last night was like a hurricane passing through. Very bad cloud to ground lightning and torrential rain. The lightning shows that were put on last night were incredible. I was monitoring I was working, so I really couldn't see. I did get to see how from the videos some of the incredible cloud to ground lightning shows that were going on all around my particular area. But the lightning strikes on the radar were I didn't count them, but they were quite a bit. Does the dew point give you an idea of how low the temperature can go? Well, yeah, Johnny. So if you've got, say, a temperature of 70 in the daytime, your dew points are going to be lower. Your dew points do tend to come up at night somewhat. If you bring your air temperature down to where the dew point is, that's where you would have 100% relative humidity. So if the spread is wide and there's no reason why that spread is going to that the dew points are going to be increasing during the night if you're changing air masses, it can give you a gauge for how cool it can get. Now, if you're in a dry air mass and you have those dew points down in the 40s and low 50s under a situation where you have clear skies, light winds, and solid radiational cooling, then you could see your air temperatures actually cool down toward the dew point. So they do give you an indicator of how cool it can get. Erica Baker, I did not see your post. If you just put it up late this afternoon, I haven't gone through all the Facebook comments, and I'll do that a bit later on. I try to do that. It sometimes can get overwhelming, and sometimes I don't get to them till like the next day or even the day after. So I apologize for that. But when there's a lot of active weather going on, I'm focusing on that. It's very hard for me to just to do that and then go on and then go to the various social media outlets and try to respond. It's tough. It is very tough. Sometimes I wish I could divide myself into 2 or 3 people to have to be able to grab commentary. But I will have some time later on this evening, and I'll go back and I will look at your post. Lisa, I'm just seeing. Lightning was insane. Says Lisa Niemes, and that it was. Sonia, nice to see you here. Sonia Rivera, good evening to you. Hope everything is going well. And by the way, I was looking earlier. A big heat going on apparently in England and over France and Spain. Not as extreme as what we saw back a few weeks ago when it got up, 115 in that spot in France back in late June. But certainly temperatures well up into the 90s to near 100, and there probably will be some temperatures into the 90s even in southern parts of England over the next day or two. Then you've got a bit of a cooler air mass to follow after that. I just gave it a quick cursory glance. I really didn't go too deep into it. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for tonight. Thanks for being here, everybody. Really appreciate it. We've got some slow days ahead. Yes, tornado did hit Cape Cod last night. I did see some video of it. That is an extremely rare occurrence indeed. But it just goes to show you, we had an extreme heat and extreme heat and humidity. When I say extreme, I don't mean anything other than the fact that if you stretch a rubber band, it probably, from the standpoint of temperatures in terms of the air mass that we were dealing with, it was stretched pretty far in one direction. Your average high this time of year is in New York City is about 86, 87. So if it goes to 97 or 98, that's 10 or 11 degrees above the average high. That's a pretty hot, for the summertime, that's a pretty high departure. In the wintertime, you get these departures sometimes that are 20, 25, or even on occasion 30 degrees above normal. So we sort of pushed the envelope as far as the air mass that was in the east. But also we had extremely high dew points, dew points that got into the 70s and just stayed there. So there was some tropical forcing that was involved, and you had a good solid cold front and deep upper trough swinging down out of Canada. So all the pieces were there. I could remember, by the way, one of the heat waves, I believe it was in 76 or 77, where we had one of these stretches where it was 9 or 10 days in a row of 90 degrees plus and a couple of 100-degree days peppered in there. And I think on one of those days, Central Park went to 103 or 104. When that heat wave ended, it ended with a big whimper. Okay, I remember being struck by the fact that a lot of the idea was that you were going to get this cold front to come through to break the heat wave, and you were going to wind up with some pretty active thunderstorms to break the heat, and it never really happened. The front came through dry. The heat wave broke. The next day temperatures were in the 80s and dew points fell, and the front came through as pretty much a non-event. So you need to have those dynamics there with a good solid shortwave and a decent trough to swing through to interact with all the warm tropical air that was in the east, and you had it this time around. And that's not to say you'll have it the next time around if we have another one of these short stretches of very hot weather. SG, do you watch Suspicious Observers with Ben Davis? Who's Ben Davis? A scientist studying the Earth and the activity that has been on our weather here on Earth. I don't know who Ben Davis is. There's a lot. There are all sorts of YouTube channels with all different types of perspectives with regards to the weather. Some are a little bit more out there than others. I don't know who Ben Davis is. It doesn't ring a bell to me. But does he have interesting things to say about what's going on? This is why I don't like to get too wrapped up into all of this stuff. I could spend my entire day, every day, going through all these different, these different opinions regarding what's going on, if anything is going on, because you have both sides of the equation. So that's why I kind of just stick with the actual weather and just kind of and focus on that. I am one good New Yorker. Thank you so much, LD. And Chris Alley is saying good night, and you know what? I think it's time for me to say good night. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up. All right, I'm not thinking there's anything going on. So with regards to the schedule over the next couple of days, same old story. We'll be on our regular, around this time, 7 o'clock. 7:05. I was able to started at 5 minutes after the hour. After I accidentally hit the start button. Ben Davis is a YouTube channel with Suspicious Observer. He works with NASA as a leading scientist working with the sun activity. Suspicious Observer, a great program early in the morning. Oh, that's the name of the program. Okay. I'll go take a look. I'll go take a look and see what that's all about. Okay, so regular schedule tomorrow. Website posts are up at meteorologistjoechaffee.com. Download the free weather app by going to Google Play or the App Store and just searching Joe Chaffee or meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's absolutely free. And what else? I think that's it. All right. So have a great evening, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.